And get started. I'm sure a few more people will pop in. So really excited to gather here today and talk with you about the importance of harnessing community-based fundraising to energize your capital campaign. So my name is Sandra Davis. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the founder and president of Donorly, and Donorly works with small and mid-sized nonprofits at moments of growth and change to build their fundraising muscle around using donor research, using storytelling, using community building. Our favorite kind of project is a first-time building campaign, and so I'm really excited to work through this topic today. We're here, and I'm just really thrilled to welcome Emily Rasmussen. She has a wealth of wisdom and knowledge on this topic. She's the founder of and CEO of Grapevine. And Emily, I just invite you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Grapevine.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you all for joining us today. Excited to be here with all of you. As Sandra said, my name is Emily Rasmussen. I am the founder and CEO of Grapevine. And we're the only platform dedicated to giving circles and this broader collaborative giving movement. And so what that means is we help people come together to connect with each other, to collaborate, and to pool their donations to make larger collective gifts as a group. This is a whole grassroots movement, so it's a model that we certainly did not create, but we launched about 5 years ago to bring it online. And so through that, we've been able to really help energize this movement. We've launched about 44% of all new giving circles over the last few years. And so now across our platform, we have over 1,100 active groups, 80,000 members, and collectively, our community has now moved more than $40 million to 5,000 plus nonprofits across the country. So that's the high level on us. And I'll also just note quickly, because of the audience here today, 2 quick things. One is that I'm often asked, what is the difference between an online giving circle and crowdfunding? And so I would just like to share with you, and I'm happy to go into more detail on this, but I think we have a link that we can put in the chat as well that goes into this a little bit more. But really the idea of a giving circle is more about community building, collective resources that of course includes our funds, but also often includes our time, our experience, our insights, because that third C is collaboration. And we really like to think of these communities as collaboratives where people can share their knowledge and experience with each other, and also continuation. So it's not a one-time crowdfunding campaign and then everything goes away. It's about ongoing community building and impact building together over time. So those are the 4 C's of crowd granting and how it's different from crowdfunding, just to give you that high level. And then one other thing I'll note, and I'm happy to share more on this, is that as this movement has continued to grow, we are seeing more and more nonprofits learning about the model and not only identifying giving circles as potential funders of their work, but also learning how to leverage this collaborative giving framework as a tool to build their own communities of recurring donors to support their work directly. So I think we'll talk about some of that throughout the conversation today, but that's where we fit into this space and where we're seeing nonprofits engaging more and more as well.
Very helpful. Thank you, Emily, and very impressive. Those numbers are incredible. The final idea that you mentioned is, you and I have been talking about this lately a lot, about how the idea of nonprofits kind of taking the lead on building these communities or supporting these communities at least can be really interesting additional factor in your capital campaign. So we'll talk about that a little bit more today. I'm going to go into some housekeeping rules here, and then we'll get started. So as a reminder, this call is being recorded. And if you'd like to turn on closed captioning, go ahead and navigate to the meeting controls toolbar and click the show captions icon. So we'll be selecting a series of questions from those submitted in advance. We'll spend up to 10 minutes on each question, but we're going to try to get through as many as we can. We're going to invite you to come on camera and off mic or on mic and share your name, your pronouns, your title, your organization, and then state your question. We might ask you a few follow-up questions so that we can get to the meat of the matter, and then we'll process them for you. If you didn't have time to submit a question in advance, go ahead and put it in the chat. Our colleague, Weston Gans, who's here today, give us a wave, Weston, is going to be monitoring the chat, and she's going to be our MC and help us work through the questions today. Also, feel free to put in follow-up questions or any comments or responses or ideas into the chat. We'd love for this to be kind of a lively collaboration around this topic. And with that, I think we're ready to go to our first question. So I'll turn it over to you, Weston.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to get started with a question from Amanda, who's joining us today from Dog Star Rescue. Amanda, I invite you to come off mute to talk with Sandra and Emily. But for the group, Amanda's question was one that I know we are all constantly thinking about, which is how do we reach new donors? Amanda, do you want to talk a little bit more about what prompted you to provide this question?
Yeah, so we are a nonprofit in Connecticut for dog rescue, and we're buying a new building to make our operation even larger. And we need a lot of work on that building. So we're kind of creating this capital campaign, buy the building, and help us build it. So what prompted the question is we have a ton of donors. We have great success with donors, but they are the $1,000 level donors. They are the $2,000. I want to get to donors that are going to say, hey, I'll give you 10 grand to go build all your kennels out. And I don't know how to cross that bridge to getting into those higher level donors.
Okay, great.
That's the question.
This is a perennial question, I think, for all organizations. Maybe there's different zeros from where you are now and where you want to be, but I think folks are always looking for that next donor, that next how to turn your current donors into donors who will invest even more deeply in your organization. And this always is happening during a capital campaign. And I will say that one of the things I might advise first and foremost is do a little research on your current donors or anybody. You're a dog rescue, you probably have a long list of folks who've adopted their pets from you. Maybe there's folks in there who aren't your donors yet, but could be. So I would say, donor research in order to learn from an individual. Are they philanthropic? Do they have capacity? Do they have wealth? And do they have an affinity to your organization? And probably they do if they've adopted their pet from you. So I'd say that's a first step. But I think, Emily, I'd love for you to talk about your ideas about community building and drawing people in order to create that warmth around the relationship with the organization, and some tactics maybe for doing that.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to jump in here. Thanks, Sandra. And I totally agree with that also as far as a first step. It sounds like you've been very successful with getting individual donors already. Mm-hmm. And that often is the hardest part. And then once you do that research, being able to see who has more capacity and then what is that, follow-up offer you can make to them, an invitation to join you at a different level is a natural next step. I think what we see in the giving circle space as well is that it often, when you're trying to attract new donors, is also going to those existing donors to invite them to invite others in, right? And so how can you think about not just inviting others in to make donations, but to be part of something, to be part of your mission, but also, and again, wearing my community giving circle hat here, to be part of the community. What we see with giving circles is that the majority of people, in fact, more than 80% of people who join in order to connect with other like-minded people. And there's a real strong sense of if I connect with other people through this shared cause or shared community effort to make a difference for something I care about, I'm going to make some really meaningful connections. So what we recommend to people when they're thinking about launching a giving circle or building any kind of community element with donors is to think about what is that framing, what is that ask, and making sure you're inviting people in to be part of this community and giving them opportunities to connect with each other, right, as part of that. I often like to remind nonprofits, a list of donors is not a community of donors, right? So just because you have a list doesn't mean person on row 38 knows person on row 98, right? You need to create the space for people, whether it's through in-person events or virtual learning opportunities, or an online asynchronous space where people can connect and learn and collaborate. And so we see the combination of all of those things being a really powerful way to steward donors in a way that makes sense for them. And I think it's important to keep in mind this kind of ladder of engagement when you think about building communities where you get people involved. You want them to participate, you want them to show up. But as they become more involved, as you get them to not only join this online community, for example, but make that first post, respond to that first question about what kind of updates they want to receive. You think about the ladder of engagement. Ultimately, that becomes the ladder for you to ask them for more, right? Ask them to lean in more and become an ambassador for you, invite other people to join the community, but make that additional gift. Now join this extra campaign. What we see from the types of communities that I'm familiar with, where the part of that community is a recurring donation, what we know from the research is that recurring donors also give one-time gifts. So you don't have to worry about cannibalizing your community. When you're building that recurring donor community, those are the first people you go to for those one-time gifts for that capital campaign or those additional things along the way. So hopefully that's helpful, but happy to speak more about any of those pieces.
I love all of that, Emily. That's a lot to take in. I would also say that, just to add to that, I would say that belonging, a sense of belonging, is probably one of the most powerful levers that would encourage people to want to give, that would inspire people to want to give. So that's why that concept that Emily mentioned of the person on line 32 of your document with the person on line 92, like, can you find a way to connect them together by bringing them together? One of the things we're working with a lot with our clients is, in addition to trying to connect people online, is bringing them together in person, not for a gala event or a fundraising event, but just for a kind of regular routine gathering, so that they can organically create that sense of belonging. Donors, any other stakeholders involved in your organization, if they have a way to gather together, if you think about a faith-based community, there, everybody involved in that community is always coming together once a week, and on various other holidays, and that does give a deep sense of belonging, and that's one way that you can inspire that around your own mission, to help people feel engaged and involved, and inspire them to invest in your organization. What kinds of things, Amanda, are you doing right now with your donors?
Well, it's funny. I'm literally chatting with my executive director as you're bringing this up with different ideas, because you just triggered so many thoughts with what you got, Emily just said and yourself just said. Currently, honestly, it's a lot of our sponsorships are event based. So we're doing this event, come be a sponsor for an event. And we've never had to do this big, we need $1 million type of campaign. So we're really kind of starting from scratch on all of that. And it's really, again, a lot of our sponsors, our donors are, we donate this because we're going to the event. So let me get my brand recognition out there. And now we're saying, hey, we just need money. And we're going to put your name on the building. So it is definitely a different avenue for us, which is why, Nicole and I are both on this call.
Yeah. Great. Well, it's a big topic. It's kind of why we have our companies, to help organizations maneuver through this. It's definitely, a challenge, but it's a huge reward to go through that process and be on the other side and feel like you've got a deeper, more connected community. So love that. Go ahead.
Oh, and Sandra, I was just going to say, I'd love to just add one other thought on that, because, I think yeah, there's a way of using, I think, as you were saying, this campaign as a way to build a deeper, more connected community that will have ripple effects of fundraising, support, and impact for you in years to come. So it's great that you're doing this thinking around this now as opposed to later, which could just as easily be the case. And the one other thing that I'd note is that it sounds like you're already doing these events and you're thinking, or you have, and you're thinking about ways of bringing people together in person. But keep in mind that sometimes the most powerful connections are those one-to-one connections. So I think often when we think about building community, we think, well, let's invite everyone together to an event. And that's wonderful. Let's keep doing that. But also, right, can you actually find, as Sandra said, row 73 and 97, I don't know, but whatever the rows are, and connect those people directly. I think there is, even if you're not in the middle of it, even better, right? So that they're connecting, but they've been connected by you. That is the shared interest. Now they're building a stickier and more valuable experience for the other person without you having to directly do that. So it dramatically scales your time and ability as well, while just making it a better overall experience for them too.
Oh, I love that. I think of that as like just a big kind of spider web of connections all across the community. And that is really powerful. I love that, Emily. Thank you. Weston, let's go on to the next question. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank
Emily,
you.
Emily, what you said about recurring donors not necessarily not giving another one-time gift, I think is a good segue into our next question from Penny Harris, who's not on the call, but I think her question is really interesting. She asked, what type of donor preparation for a campaign can be done to set up a connection that will continue into annual renewing support?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. It definitely connects to what we were talking about, which is, thinking about a campaign more as a launch to a community, in a sense, a launch to something that isn't just a campaign. And then, like I was mentioning earlier with crowdfunding, right? Then we've hit the number, now we're done. Now everyone goes away, the campaign's done. We've, great, successful, we hit our goal. Instead, and actually what we do at Grapevine when we think about launching giving circles, communities, we also often launch with a big event and a bit of a campaign. But our campaign is focused on, hey, let's have that big event. Let's invite people. Let's tell people why we're doing this, why it's important, make sure we have some supporters in the room, and each pull in another 5 people to join us so that by the end of this, we say, okay, who's in? And we have all the hands going up, right? And okay, great. So the next thing we're going to do is this gathering, and everyone's bringing another 3 or 5 people. And so right from the beginning, you're building your fundraising strategy in collaboration with the community and by engaging them. And the idea is that you're working to this launch, to an initial campaign of, hey, by our first grant cycle, by the end of this campaign, right, we want to have raised $100,000, $1 million, I think was the number brought up earlier. Whatever the number is, that's kind of the end of the first campaign and the beginning of the rest of the community building and impact building we get to do together over time. And now we've had this really wonderful shared experience, by the way, that is one of the best things to build that sense of belonging and connection with other people, to where now you're really vested in this and can't wait to hear what's up next and where funds are going to continue the impact. So I would just think about it, very similar. I think nonprofits do this all the time, but it's just kind of reframing it a little bit. Where is the start and end date? And how do we communicate that effectively to the donors?
I love that, Emily. And I think that when nonprofits are thinking about a building campaign or a big endowment campaign, something like that, there is a worry and a fear, and sometimes it plays out this way, that you're going to tax your current donors by asking them for, large gifts. And then when you're done, when we've built the building, you've cut the ribbon, and you've opened your doors, everybody's exhausted. And so you're afraid to ask them again, you're concerned about asking them again. But maybe you've spent so much time, sometimes it plays out that you spent so much time, raising the money for that one project, you're at your bandwidth and you weren't able to kind of build your community while you're going, so that you've got the next round of, new donors. If certain donors want to step down after that project, that's fine, because you've got other people kind of waiting in the wings to take leadership. But I think that even though the staff is exhausted at that moment of ribbon cutting and opening a new building is one of the most exciting moments for any organization, and to be able to leverage that to invite in new people and to refresh the excitement and passion for your biggest donors is such an important thing, to make sure that once you've opened that building, you can pay the bills, you can pay, for the heat and the new security staff and whatever else you need to pay for, and make sure that you also have the funds to support the probably wider mission that you're going to be able to provide to the community. So that building that sense of belonging and taking the time to really foster that that sense and that deeper community is going to be so important during a campaign. It's just such a huge opportunity to take advantage of. It's not easy, but it's so important for the future of an organization.
Yeah, it all makes sense to me. And I feel like one other just very tactical thing is, maybe when you're launching this campaign, there's an initial gift, but then part of the ask, that initial ask, so you don't have to go back too soon, set up that recurring donation.
Yeah.
Part of your pitch from the beginning, right, Sandra, with any of these campaigns, it's not just building the building. Yeah. It's the impact that building or whatever it is going to have for the community years into the future. So you're already painting the vision. Make sure that they know you want them to be a part of the whole thing, and get that set up from the start. And not everyone will do it, but a fair number will. And then you already have this great base to work from.
And you're signaling the expectation or the hope of what you want from your community. We're about to set up a letter we're sending out at the end of the year for one of our campaign clients that's asking for a 3-year commitment to the annual fund, and alongside it a 3-year commitment of a similar size to the campaign. So it's signaling to them that we need their annual fund support. We're not expecting it to grow during these times when we're also asking you for a campaign fund gift, but we're hopefully locking, or some folks will buy into locking it into 3 years. And then by the time those 3 years are over, then we are ready for like an exciting next conversation about their support of the organization. So 100%, I think that's a great idea. And I love the idea of the reoccurring gift, just locking that in, because then routinely, as long as you keep in touch with folks and keep building on that relationship, that is kind of in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm. That was great. Thank you both. I want to remind everyone that you can ask your questions in the chat. If one of our discussions have sparked something for you in your organization, feel free to drop it there. But in the meantime, I want to highlight a question from Elena from Sigma Camp, who's not on the call, but Elena had asked about starting an upcoming alumni campaign. And I know we talked about this offline, Emily. I was hoping that you could talk about what you're seeing with alumni campaigns, or tips and tricks for starting anything of that sort for any of the folks on the call.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak about this. I love this model. I love this concept of engaging your alumni to give back to the organization. And what I often see is that organizations can struggle with that jump from being in an alumni group and sort of their alumni engagement team to actually, and activating those alumni and inviting them to events, to actually getting those alumni to give back and to donate as well. I'm a big believer in just asking up front, as I mentioned earlier, ask for that recurring gift from the beginning. And I think sometimes with alumni engagement efforts, we're a little afraid to ask. And so I think there's a little bit more that we can do to bring those worlds together. What I see, what I'm excited about in this space is that I see organically alumni self-organizing. So not going through the school, no one from your office, right? But actually self-organizing and coming to Grapevine to start their own giving circles. they're coming to us and saying, we want to give back together. We want to make a bigger difference. We want to stay in touch with each other. And this is such a great way to do it, and almost excuse, if you will, or reason to do it, right? To make sure that we're connecting with each other twice a year. And so we are seeing alumni wanting to do that. And what's interesting to me is that when they come to us to get started, often I also hear some of the challenges that they're facing at the organization. Oh, we're alumni of fill in the blank organization. We want to give back, but when we try to go to the development office, to the school itself, they didn't want us to do it. They wanted to direct us to give to these existing things that they wanted, or they didn't want to let us like pool our money and give it in this way, or they were running into red tape. And so I think, to me, what's exciting about that is that I think more alumni want to give back. They just need more flexible tools to do it in the way that they would like to. And so if you give them the space to do that and kind of create the experience and the community, the connections that they want through it, because most of them, I would say, are probably looking for that ability to connect with other fellow alumni through it. I'm very optimistic about this. And so, as I said, we support many giving circles on Grapevine that do this. So we could be a great tool for this type of experience. Happy to talk more about that. But in general, yeah, I think looking to the alumni, seeing what they want, how they want to give, and then creating an opportunity for them to really easily connect with each other and give back to support those things is what I would recommend.
I'm curious, Emily, so this is largely schools that you've worked with, or is there other kind of other versions of alumni?
Other. So I would say we haven't worked directly with schools, but more specific alumni coming to us and saying, we want to come together and give.
Okay.
And so they're using Grapevine to then come together, pool money, and then make a gift to the school for the purpose of fill in the blank. Or in some cases, even just to a broad range of nonprofits. It's not always to the school,
okay.
right? And so even there, though, there's an opportunity for a school to kind of be the umbrella under which they're coming together to stay connected and make a difference.
That's great. And what would you say for the groups you've seen, the giving circles you've seen that are formed around an alumni group? What would you see are kind of the essentials for making sure they're successful? Like, does it need one leader? Does it need a structure of some kind that works best?
Yeah, so we typically recommend 2 to 3 leaders is ideal, because most people are doing this to, like I said, connect with others while making a difference. And so it's volunteer, and it's nice for a leader to have a co-leader to help facilitate. So that's normally what we recommend. Certainly not all groups have 2 or 3. So if you have one, that's fine. But yes, certainly one strong leader. If you're from an organization like Elena, you are, I would say having you or someone from your organization as a co-leader support, plus an alumna or alumni would be helpful, so that you have someone from the organization and sort of a community representative leader, if you will. So that's typically what we recommend. I think the other thing is thinking about the cadence of donations. So if you think about communities, what is the natural cadence at which people would want to come together? For many of our communities, the most popular model is quarterly. And by come together, I don't mean you have to come together in person, but have a touch point, right? Whether it's asynchronous or it's virtual calls like this or an in-person something. And so for the alumni group, maybe it's every 6 months or a year. If I'm in my local community, I think I might want to connect with people quarterly more often. I'm really active in this community. For an alumni group where we're not as connected as much anymore, maybe 6 months or a year kind of resonates a little bit more with me. And that is what we have seen some of these groups do. Typically, I've seen the alumni groups set up like an annual model. And so those would be a couple of recommendations. I think a third one is thinking about what is the structure through which you're enabling them to share where they would like money to go. And so with our groups, what we've seen is this nomination and then voting process. And so that's a really nice democratic model where even if people don't participate, the knowledge that they could, we've done several studies like this with our community, and we see this in others as well. even if people don't nominate particular programs where their money could go, or if you've nominated them because you're setting the structure, but then you're inviting them to vote on where their pooled funds will go between these 3 different programs, just the knowledge that they could, that sense of agency that you're providing them is really powerful. And I'll just make a quick note on this while we're on this topic, but there is a lot of research around communities, and here we're talking about online communities from our experience at Grapevine. And what we see with online communities is that a thriving, healthy online community is still made up of 90% of members who are what we call lurkers, which are people that aren't actually engaging. If you looked at them, you'd think, oh, they're not engaged, they're not having a good experience. Oh, but actually they are. They just might not be contributing, but they are still, many of them are still seeing the content. They still know they have the opportunity to participate. So don't assume that those lurkers aren't engaged. 9%, 8 to 9%, I believe, are what we call occasional contributors. And then it's really just 1 to 2% that are your active contributors. So keep that in mind. I think sometimes we just need to, have a better sense of the benchmarks of what we're working with, what an active community is, and know that people have different levels of engagement and experience that they're looking to get, but still just getting to be a part of it is very valuable, regardless of how they directly engage.
That is really useful information, and probably really useful for folks who need to report out to board members or to their leadership about how it's working. I confess I am a very active lurker on in a couple of Facebook groups, so that rings true from my personal experience. And okay, that's really, really, really interesting advice. One more question for you, and then we'll move on. Emily, do these groups normally set a specific fundraising goal that they work towards, like a number to raise?
They do. Most of our groups do, and they're included. And the way that they set that goal can vary, right? And so for some groups, it might be that they've already identified the thing they want to support, and so now they're trying to reach that goal. For many, it's not that way. For many, it's more about, as a community, we've all committed to giving $100 a quarter, to use my example earlier.
Yeah.
And so our goal is to get 100 members doing that. Ultimately, that means we'll have $10,000 to give. And that's a really good number that we can give to a nonprofit that they can do something meaningful with. And so it might be more membership based or amount based, but often each of these cycles will have a set goal that they're trying to achieve.
Great, thank you. Very useful. My wheels are spinning about how I can apply this in various ways. Thank you, Weston.
It was such an interesting statistic, Emily. I'm thinking about it as well as I lurk in places. But anyway,
I'm also an active lurker in many communities. So
I'm going to continue on to our next question, which is from Daniela from Boulder Opera, which I thought was pretty interesting. Daniela, if you're on the chat, feel free to come off mute, but I don't think you're here. Her question was, what do you think about doing a GoFundMe campaign, and what types of messages could align well with this? And I brought this up. I know that there are many alternatives to GoFundMe. That is, of course, a popular title, but makes me think of Classy or GiveButter or even Facebook fundraising. And if I missed your favorite GoFundMe alternative, please drop it in the chat. I'd love to learn more about it. But again, what do we think about GoFundMe campaigns and the types of messaging to use on a platform like that?
I mean, I can just quickly jump in, Sandra, and just say, like, what I was sharing before about the difference between crowdfunding and crowd granting. I think both are fantastic tools and different approaches, and but still very much about this collective giving model, right? And a campaign and trying to raise awareness. So I'm a fan of these types of campaigns. I tend to, given my work and focus, be more of a fan of campaigns that can live beyond a one-time campaign and that can continue to engage donors. So that's where the whole crowd granting model, I think, appeals to me personally a little bit more, but I think often these work in tandem. So just last note on this is that, kind of like what I was sharing before, you almost want to think about, and we counsel people on thinking about how they can launch a giving circle, a community, kind of through a campaign, right? Let's do a little month-long, 3-month-long launch campaign so we can get awareness out there. We can get people in. Deadlines are helpful when you're trying to get people motivated and to move, deadlines and goals. And so that's certainly a part of how we think about trying to launch these groups. And then on the flip side, what we've also seen is once these groups are together and they're giving in a recurring manner, let's say it's a group that's giving every quarter and they're granting, and that's great. Well, we just saw this actually with the hurricanes in Florida. Now these groups are saying, oh my God, beyond what we're already doing, there's a bigger need right here on our doorstep, or there's a bigger need within our community. How do we now, as a group, launch a crowdfunding campaign to leverage all of our networks and resources to try and raise more for a particular issue? And so I think these two can work very nicely in tandem in both of those ways.
I love that. I love what you say about deadlines being key. There's nothing more helpful than a deadline or a goal to move things forward. And I think when I think of GoFundMe, I think of a specific moment that needs fundraising or that needs an infusion of funds. And I love how you're talking about, using that to kind of identify and build the community. And then what do you do next? It's a little bit like what we talked about around a capital campaign, making sure you're not just fundraising for that one moment, but you're thinking about how to continually engage and draw in that group who was inspired to, react to that moment. But then what do you do next? How can you keep things moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
If I may jump in about something that this sparked for me, for everyone on the call, I sit in Donor.ly's research team. And Emily, I'm thinking about what you said about a campaign that can live on. And something that I have noticed in a lot of these crowd situations, similar like a Facebook or a GoFundMe, sometimes you don't get all of the information about an individual when they make a gift. And if you can gather those names, emails, any address, any bit of information on who they are, that will allow you to continue the communication and hopefully bring them in again, gain insight into their giving and so on. So I say use them or use these systems to get gifts, but please be aware of some of those privacy settings and make sure that you can get as much info as you can about those donors. With that, oh, pardon?
That's good advice. Yes.
Agreement.
This is my last call to the group. If you have any questions to add to the conversation, please throw them in the chat. But before we wrap up, the last question I have from pre-submissions is one I'm going to combine from Christina at Fort Plain Museum and Tim Turner from Satisfeed. Christina asked, what are good strategies to fundraise when you don't have the people power? And Tim asked, what is the process to enlist the help and support of volunteers to peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns?
I mean, does any nonprofit ever have enough people power? I don't think so. So that's a great question. Let's process this question. And then thinking about volunteers, I love that. So what I would just say, I'm going to throw this over to you, Emily, but I would just say that more and more there are more and more platforms and tools that can create efficiencies for us in the nonprofit world. The for-profit world spends a lot of time thinking about how to create efficiencies and how to use AI, how to use, platforms that save us time. And I would say that as much as you can lean into that as a start to help increase the bandwidth from the people power you do have. But Emily, you've talked a little bit about really leveraging folks in your community and empowering them. And I'd love to just dive into that all the deeper.
Yeah, I love these questions, and I feel like they almost answer each other in a way. So what do you do when you don't have the people power? You leverage your volunteers. And, so thank you all. We're done here. No, but I think it is a perennial problem. We never have enough people to do all the things that we want to do. And so how can you think about your staff building more of the containers and the infrastructure to unlock the people power within your volunteer base, within your donor base, within your broader community of supporters, right? So that's what I would be thinking about. That is what I think a lot about. A great example, I mean, we're an organization too with a small team, and we have a very large community, and we're trying to do a lot with a little. And so just one personal experience here recently, I was invited to go and speak at a conference. And so had accepted that. I was planning on that. And then I got an invitation to go to another conference, and I just couldn't make the two. They were conflicting with each other in different cities. And so I thought, well, wait a minute, I actually have a great community of people in Denver. That happened to be where this other conference was. I don't need to be the one there. Maybe I can reach out to some of my most strongest advocates in Denver, back to that like engagement ladder, people who have already talked on the panel for me or leaned in and asked how they could help, people who already had sort of raised their hand in these ways. There's this kind of way of thinking in community organizing circles that you don't ask people who wants to be a leader, because you'll get a lot of hands raised, but that doesn't mean those are your natural leaders who are actually going to lean in and lead and do the work, right? The real leaders are the ones who emerge by their actions. So who are the ones who have shown you in what they've done that they're ready to lean in? Anyway, out of that, identified a couple of women. They were beyond thrilled to come together, connect with each other. Again, coming back to the connecting piece, they got to meet in person, had the best time, I'm sure are now lifelong friends. And they got to go to this conference, make amazing connections for us, and basically, scale my time and capacity in doing that. So that's just one example. And now of course, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, if we map all the conferences next year and we think about all of our community members, how can we scale this model? Because we do have all of these supporters in all these places. So I think that's an important one to keep in mind, is think about who is in your community, and then what is the kind of model that you can put in place to unlock for them. You do need to, I would say, give them very clear guidance and make it very easy and very simple. And also permission. I think often we don't realize this enough, but people need to feel a sense of permission and sort of agency bestowed upon them from you to actually go and do things. And so being pretty clear about that, I think, is a really, really important one. So that's just one example. I certainly in the Giving Circle space, this is a people-powered movement. It's all about word of mouth and asking each person, when you come to the next event, invite one more person, so thinking about how you can leverage those network effects to continue to invite people in and actually even do some of the work in advocating.
I think it's a real testament to your organization that you have put in the work to build this community and have these, advocates and ambassadors for you within your community. So what you described doesn't happen overnight. I'm sure you worked very hard to, make sure that folks feel connected and belonging to your organization as well as to the work that they're doing. It also makes me think about, in the nonprofit space, about board members as volunteers and reminding them to be ambassadors, reminding them that when they're out and about and networking, that they're not only talking about what they do in their work life, but that they always remember to talk about their board membership and the organization that they are part of, so that they can, be that ambassador and build that relationship out into the wider community and begin to identify your next board members or your next donors through those conversations that their board membership might spark. That's, one powerful lever, as well as anybody who's on any kind of advisory committee, or obviously, alums again, or past staff, anything like that, where you can kind of leverage their relationships as they're kind of out and about in the world. The other thing that makes me, that I wanted to mention in terms of efficiencies, so that you can free up some staff time, is there are ways to obviously draw in volunteers, but even to have some part-time paid staff, especially for administrative work, There are so many organizations where you can hire a virtual assistant for a few hours or a specific projects that they are really game to do and really expert on. And you might not want to hire a full-time person, or you might not want to hire a generalist to do a variety of things, but you could hire a virtual assistant to take on a project here and there. Some of the work we do as fundraisers is very seasonal. So you might need, a lot of people power at the end of the calendar year, not so much, at the beginning of Q2. So that's something to think about too, in terms of an expenditure that could really pay off for your organization and free up some of your time so that you can spend it doing what you need to do. So I hope that sparks a few ideas at least. Is that go ahead, Barbara. I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this. This is a great conversation. And actually, I'm kind of in the midst of something myself regarding leading an alumni effort. And so I just picked up a few little interesting tidbits. One of the things I wanted to just, and I do want to learn more about what you're doing, and excuse me for coming in late. But one of the things I think this is a tangent to what you're saying is, I think a lot of it, and I put this in the notes a moment ago, is about creating a culture of philanthropy within the organization. And I'm a firm believer in all kinds of people within your organization, whether they're program staff, whether they're all the people who don't have the title of fundraiser or development officer can oftentimes be among the most effective individuals who are connecting. And that's about leveraging your staff. It's about helping the board to understand, to your point, Sandra, about ambassadors and advocates. I mean, it's being an asker, being a solicitor is only one part of it.
Yeah.
Being a thanker is a really important part. Everybody can thank. And it's really, really meaningful. And I think it's particularly for small organizations that are so short-staffed, it's really to help everybody understand that they're all part of this, and that fundraising just doesn't, it's more than just who sits in that office,
Right.
Who comes in part-time. So I think that's an important message. And that comes from leadership, and that has to be infused, especially within small organizations.
I love that. That's so great. And of course, donors want nothing more than to talk to the folks who are actually on the front lines of the mission, more so than the development staff. So the more you can make those connections, and that gets back to, one of the things Emily said earlier on, is build that community across the entire group of people, and then it's easier as a fundraiser to step back and just let the magic happen.
Well, I would only add to that, and Sandra's probably heard me say this before, we are merely, those of us who have been on the fundraising side, we are merely the air traffic controllers. So we just make sure the jets aren't crashing into each other, but we're also figuring out who has to land where and which runways they're on. So I always say that this work is somewhere between being an air traffic controller and a midwife. So if you can find that intersection, it might sort of conjure that image in your head.
That's quite an image. Oh, I love that. I love that.
Well, we are just, we're at 1:52 Eastern. So Sandra, I'm going to pass it off to you to wrap us up.
All right. Emily, any other takeaways or last comments before I do that, though?
I thank you so much for having me for the conversation. And it's exciting for me to hear all of these wonderful questions around community and engaging donors and connecting. And so if anyone wants to be in touch about that more, it is an area that we're really thinking a lot about and working with nonprofits a lot on, in terms of helping them to think about these things and actually build these recurring communities of donors through this giving circle model. So I think we have some links and things we'll put in the chat, but please don't hesitate to be in touch. Would love to hear from you, hear what you're thinking about, and see if we might be able to be helpful. And I'll also just note that For anyone who wants to learn more about the Giving Circle movement broadly and how nonprofits can engage with it, while we do a number of trainings and things, we also are part of a broader field of organizations supporting this movement. And another organization you might check out is Philanthropy Together, which does trainings for nonprofits who are interested in learning more about the broader movement as well. So lots of resources out there for you to learn from and get engaged if it's of interest.
That's great. Thank you, Emily. So we will put all of those links in the chat, and we will also be following up with an email, with 2 emails, actually. We're going to send you an email after this with a little survey, and we'll make sure to get all this contact information in there, and Emily's website, as well as where you can follow her on Instagram and X and LinkedIn. You can also check out Donor-Lee's resources on our website at donorlee.com and through our socials at @_DonorLee. Again, we'll put that in the chat and in a follow-up email. And then on Monday, we'll be sending out a copy of the video with some takeaways. So you'll receive all of that. For those of you who are listening to me but not here, we'll make sure to get that information to you. And then I just wanted to alert you that our next hot seat coaching session will be with Gary Bagley. He is an expert on navigating the unique challenges of nonprofit leadership. He has great advice around being that ED, and he has a lot of work and background around navigating the boardroom for board members and for leadership. And every time I get together with Gary to talk, I always have such a good time. So he will be an exciting addition to this coaching session. So think about what your conversation or your questions are around that topic. So that session will be on November 22nd, Friday, November 22nd at 1 p.m. That's the Friday before the Thanksgiving holiday. And we're going to take a break in December, but we'll pick up again in January. So thank you all for being here. I love these sessions. It's so much fun. I always come away from these with just a level of energy and excitement about the work we do and the amazing people who are in this nonprofit space and in this fundraising space. It's just so fun to gather together every month with all of you. Glad you could be here. Thank you for all these amazing questions. Emily, thank you again. It's just a joy to chat with you, and your knowledge around giving circles just widens my kind of view on how we can do the work we do for the nonprofits we work with. So I'm really appreciative of your time and of all the work you've done to grow the Giving Circle space and to grow Grapevine as a really amazing platform to support that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really
Thank
appreciate the
you.
opportunity to share with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.